be the worst in the room. You know what I'm saying?
Believe me, I know exactly what you're saying. Believe me,
Yeah.
it's a story of my life.
Yeah, but it's great. I mean, this is how we grow. This is how we're called to the front.
This is a beautiful album. We were just talking about it before we turned the microphones on. I love the sound of this record. I love how musical this record is. I love everything about it. And we're going to talk a little bit about the stories behind the record in just a second. So congratulations on it.
Thank you, Tom.
When the last record came out, I remember you and I were in here. I mean, we were excited about it, and you were excited about it. You didn't strike me as someone who had any idea that it was going to get as big as it did.
You can't plan for these things, you know. You have to meet it as it comes. And with the first record, with Wolastoqiyik Lintuwakonawa, I created it for such a specific reason and for a specific purpose and for my community, you know. So all of the attention and all the eyes and ears that came around that work, it was welcome, of course, you know, but never the intention. So it was about, I guess, readjusting the metric and thinking like, okay, well, now that people are listening, you know, even the ones that don't necessarily have a pathway into the language or have an understanding of what you're singing about, they're still keen to hear. So what's that about?
Hold on, let me make sure I understand what you're saying here. So that the last record was in some ways like just a gift to your community, like a gift to your people.
Yeah.
And then people outside of your community, both indigenous and non-indigenous, caught on to the record, and the record kind of blows up. And all of a sudden you have so many different ears on you than you were expecting. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, what am I going to do now?
Yeah, I guess sitting in that question and just being like, okay, now what? And then also, you know, it's as broad as thinking about your audience, but it's also as small as thinking about like your home and like your parents, and how my mother as an indigenous person would listen, and specifically a Wolastoqiyik, would listen to this record with an understanding and experiencing, you know, every note of that in a different way than somebody like my father, who like, love him, God bless him, but you know, he's like, oh, I put it on when I work. It's nice background music. You know, he listens to it totally differently
Because he doesn't speak the language.
Exactly, right? And so this is like, and yet realizing that, you know, I want to speak to the Stephen Dutchers too, you know, as much as my first album was a creation for community. And trust and believe there's still engagement of language and culture on this. It's not like I'm turning away from this. But it is just it's an expansion of that dialogue and that conversation and who I'm speaking to and the stories I'm trying to tell.
What considerations do you have to take when you place your lens that way?
Everything.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, how much time you got?
Listen.
Like, yeah, I mean, just to scratch the surface of it, I mean, from a pure sonic level, thinking about singing in a different language, you sing different. You know, you move your mouth different.
You mean the fact that you're singing in English on this record?
Yeah. You know, I think, and that's kind of what I'm getting at in terms of speaking directly to an audience. That maybe you didn't intend, is making that turn to English and you know, kind of thinking about the poetry that inspires you and trying to bring that forward and put sounds around that. It's a new challenge. It's an interesting challenge. And two, in comparison to the first record, because I was working with all those ancestor songs, all those cylinder recordings, in a way, those melodies felt like I had to stay faithful or stay close enough to them that it meant something. So I wasn't just coming and reinterpreting them how I saw fit. I was really trying to honor the fidelity of those original recordings. Now with this one, because I didn't have those as source material,
you had more of a blank slate.
Total. I mean, like, it's like freedom, both melodically and how you're going to sing and which voice you're going to use. It felt complete freedom.
Is there pressure there? Because the thing that you're smiling at me, but is there, because
diamonds are made, baby. Diamonds are made.
because the thing that you got all the acclaim for and all the attention for is this one thing and derived from this one thing, and now all eyes are on you, and you're saying, okay, I gotta come at this now from a blanker.
One would think he would
space.
just replicate the success from before.
Yeah, find more. But listen,
That would have been the smart idea.
find more recordings, and
Well, that was the thing. I didn't even have to do the work. Like, based on that first bout of research that I did, there were over 100 songs that were collected. So I used it on the first record. I used 11. I could have made 4 more archive records, right? But it's just, for me, the statement had been said. The thing had been done, and I wanted to move on to other stories. And kind of a little paradoxically, this is a much more personal excavation, I think, than even something that's created in my, in my people's language, former people. And yet this is kind of looking inward on that experience. And part of that experience is in English. As I live and breathe, as I sit here and talk to you. We can't do it in Wolastoqiyik, although maybe someday we could.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I'd like that.
Do a day. Maybe.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe someday.
This album started with a poem, I'm told.
Yeah.
What poem?
Yeah, I guess it did start. You really do your digging, don't you? I guess it did start with a poem. Yeah. There were these poems that I found in this collection of works that were looking at the intersection of queerness and of indigenous identity. So that, that two-spirit place, that intersection. And all of these poems were looking at this particular, it's actually a eulogy to this particular two-spirit person that was murdered in the 90s. And this Cherokee poet kind of puts these words around the difficulty of that experience. Oh, there's this beautiful quote. The place that two discriminations meet is a dangerous place to live.
The place that two discriminations meet is a dangerous place to live. Wow.
And I mean, that sat on my heart for a while. And I thought, I want to help to tell this story. And I guess it was because I wasn't necessarily, because I knew I wanted to engage English in some way and speak to audience and tell our stories in a more direct way. But I didn't necessarily have the confidence of writing my own stuff in English. So this was kind of, there's a couple ways to enter the water. You can jump all the way in.
Yeah.
You can dip a toe. This was my dipping a toe. So I engaged somebody else's words and put some music around those words and put my melodies around those words to try to come to my interpretation of what all that meant. And really, he's talking about resilience and beauty in that work. So,
do you have any of that poem with you right now?
Of course. I don't leave home without it.
Let me hear it a little bit.
Oh, I gotta get my glasses. Hold on.
Oh my God.
There's three poems.
Which one would you like to read?
Let me decide. Not that one. Together we emerge.
Okay.
From the heavy debris of loss, we emerge. Together we emerge. With giveaways of yellow and white corn to anoint the tip of your tongue. Feast on memories of your first laughter and sing an honor song to the slowed heartbeat of your first and final breath. We emerge. Together we emerge. Voices strained and wearied from wailing. Together we emerge in beauty. You will be our song.
What goes through your mind now reading that?
I mean, how much I'm not a poet or an orator.
You sound great reading
anything.
it.
Stop that. You don't need to do that. I'm a musician, Tom. Let's leave it at that.
You sound great. What goes through your mind when you read that?
I mean, at that final line, "You will be our song," kind of sits with me. And I go to that track on the record and I listen. Well, I can't help in my head hear the choir sing that line over and over again. You will be our song. It's kind of, for me, the emotional climax of this whole experience. Like we were talking about earlier, this is a record.
It's an album,
meant to be an album, meant to be experienced in its totality. And for me, that Emerge song, it's getting at the kind of spirit of the work and thinking about collectivity and the importance of each other. I think about the ways in my life in which, when I've fallen or not been able to reach all the things I thought I was going to do or the plans that I thought I had. It's always been community that's been there to step right beside you and say, well, we got you. We're here with you. And so, yeah, the collectivity of that message in the hardest place. And this record is kind of engaging that, like the sorrow of that experience, but also the resilience, the beauty of that resilience, and kind of how those sit upright beside each other.
I want to play the first track off the record because this is sort of the introduction to the record, and it really shows the payoff of all the work you've been doing. Just take a listen to this.
Just on that egg, you know.
That is Skijin Uwiyaguk. Is there an Skijin Uwiyaguk?
Yeah, it's kind of a skij. Oh, jeez.
All right.
Skijin Uwiyaguk. So maybe not. No.
I was listening to it and I was hearing the words pronounced because I was practicing before you came in.
Nice, man.
Come on, you know, gotcha.
I know.
And I was saying Skijin Uwiyaguk.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
But I didn't know if it was Skijin Uwiyaguk. Or whether there's
that one sounds better for me.
Skijin Uwiyaguk?
Yeah, that's nice and just flows off the tongue, eh?
Skijin Uwiyaguk it is.
Oh my gosh, if I could hear you say that a million times. Because you know what you're saying, by the way.
What am I saying?
You're saying Indian land.
Really?
Over and over again. Yeah, which I just love.
Tell me about that song.
This song, well, it's in a way why I guess I started out with it. Even though it wasn't the first song that I wrote, I kind of started with it because it was connected to that first album. When I was sitting and doing that research that led to the first album, this anthropologist, when he was going around and collecting these songs, he didn't just focus on the songs. Like he was going and, you know, hearing our stories and transcribing them and, you know, taking sacred objects and back to the museum and stuff. So there was a lot of things in the museum outside of just the song archive. So the lyrics for this first song, Skijin Uwiyaguk, come from that archival space. And it's the most like beautiful statement of sovereignty. And when I realized how long ago it had been since those words had been uttered and how we're still kind of saying that today, that it was like this beautiful continuum. So the quote was, "Dan gwnu iwug wazis, kmau sawinuwog dam giliminu jikidakami gomen, mejamil askamil skijin uwiyaguk." As long as there's a child among my people, we will protect the land, always and forever, Indian land. So I was like, whoa, okay. Like it just felt, I was like, that's a lyric for sure. I want to tell that story. And in the same way with the first record that we brought those archival voices forward and tried to let them speak. I wanted to do that with this text too. And so finding poetry and gathering English ones, but also, you know, kind of prayers from the language and stuff and ancestor quotes. And it kind of came from all over.
Who is the voice we hear in you in collaboration with on that track?
Yeah. So that's Charles Laporte, who's from Tobic First Nation, which is my mother's community. And it is just an audio archive. Like our stories had been collected at a couple different points throughout history. This one is actually one of the most recent ones, so it's from the 60s, but it's all in language. And he's actually telling the story about Motewolonuwok, which is the title of the record, and it's talking about those magical people, those spirit people. And I just love that it's still, you know, we have that concept and these ideas that are still resonant within our communities, that are still within our stories, that are still within our language, you know.
The conversations you're having now in interviews and in performance and all that stuff, and with your own community, these are not new stories. These are the same stories that you're listening to someone speak 50, 60 years before.
Right. You know, and you join that conversation and understand that like you're laying something down so that others are going to join your conversation too.
I want to listen to a song off the new record that is that aforementioned departure from the format we've been talking about up to this point. This is Ancestors to You.
Faces I see, they look like sheep. I need to live so I can breathe. Tears of language I speak away, better than my own alone.
This band,
without her,
musicians, oh my God.
where do they go?
Good. I love how you're listening to your own record and going, oh, this.
It kind of, I mean, I'm not blowing my own mind. It's these people I get to play with. Incredible musicians. A whole new band on this record. So it's really, be the worst in the room. You know what I'm saying?
Believe me, I know exactly what you're saying. Believe me.
Yeah.
It's a story of my life.
Yeah. But it's great. I mean, this is how we grow. This is how we're called to the front, is because we are always learning from those around us.
Speaking of learning from those around us, tell me what inspired that song.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Ancestors Too Young. I mean, it's not what it seems like. I think that title even has such a different context right now, given what we've, gone through in the last couple of years and all the things that have like come to light. It was also talking about experiences that I had about going up north and seeing the suicidality crisis has like a ripple effect in a community that's so tight knit.
You had traveled up north?
Yeah.
Where'd you
It's
go?
actually part of my old job. Like before I was doing music, I got to go to some Anishinaabe communities in Northern Ontario.
Right.
And just hearing stories from these families and understanding that like this doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it's actually like it's kind of coast to coast to coast.
Yeah.
And then when you add on that intersection, like talking about the fact that our LGBT, that brothers and sisters and kin are also experiencing high rates within that. When we talk about suicidality, I think those intersections have rarely been explored, but I think it's important to contend with that, right? And so the lyrics are just coming from that experience of hearing the grief story and trying to understanding that you'll never, until you're inside of it, you'll never be inside of it, but trying to be part of that community that holds somebody's grief, is a sacred act. And there's a trumpet solo at the end of that song that's pretty wild, like unhinged. I remember like being in the studio and asking the trumpeter, kind of explaining this story of going up and hearing those moms talk about their grief.
After having lost children.
Yeah, exactly. And saying, do you think you could just play that? Just play grief? And Lena, who's the trumpeter, I think just took her one take. It just went in and just wailed it out, And it's like, it is really like a way of playing that instrument like I've never heard before. But it's, you try to tell these hard stories, and it's, you hope that you can hold it in a way that is going to represent something and mean something to the people that have lost.
Why did you sing that one in English?
It's kind of just how it came out. That experience for me, it was an English experience, and I guess the people who I've processed my grief with in my own life that's often been in English spaces and English circles. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, that went. Funny enough, I actually have it all written out in language too, and I do have both. I don't know that I've sung both. I've only sung the English one before, but it is kind of cool to have this exercise of maintaining, even if you are going to sing in English, like making sure that there's a because I think it's the spirit of the work that I wanted to do is always looking at language and revitalization and the importance of keeping strong. There's a song called The Land That Held Them, and it's really getting into some storytelling and trying to look at some hard histories that we've had. And the producer came over the speaker and said, "What if you just read it? What if you sang it like you were reading the newspaper? Like just like it was the most casual thing."
So not put a whole bunch of emotion and heart into it.
Yeah. And that was the take we used. And I remember exactly finishing that take and just losing it, just I had to leave the studio and just like take a minute in the alley and just kind of cry it out, you know, just because it was like, because at the end of it, that the kind of non-feeling, the non-emotive, the casualness from which I sang it at the end of the day was reflected by the fact that these stories can sometimes be handled with such the facts of it.
Yeah.
When they hit the headlines.
Yeah.
You know, and we forget that they're people and they have families.
Yeah. I find that really interesting that, you know, you were putting these incredibly, you know, hard, I don't want to say tragic, but like hard stories, and you were putting yourself into them to make sure that the emotion matched the severity of what had happened and the trauma of what had happened. And then when the producer says read it like a newspaper, you have this realization that like, oh, this is how it's actually told. Right. You know, someone dead in northern Manitoba is an article, is a headline written in a paper, and the person's, you know, family who will never see that person again, and then the family that's continued, you know, that's not reflected in the headline. Right. And that is the thing that actually makes you more emotional.
That's right.
Is singing it that dispassionately actually made you more emotional.
That's right. It's like for me actually, and what it was a huge song inspiration for that song particularly was a song called Mississippi Goddamn by Nina Simone.
This is the land that held them?
Yeah.
Cool. Can we play a little bit of that?
Sure.
Down by the river she went, into the water she went, not by choice the rocks weighed down, just one story among the rest.
Right. Just one story among the rest, and you're singing it that dispassionately, and there's the power behind it.
Yeah.
So you're inspired by Nina Simone's
Mississippi Goddamn.
Iconic recording.
Yeah, you know that one?
Yeah, sure do.
Alabama's got me so upset. But what about Winnipeg Goddamn? What about Saskatchewan Goddamn? You know, for me, those stories deserve to be told in a way that laid them bare too. And yeah, that was my little attempt at that.
We talked about some of the real life issues in this country and around the world that you're addressing in this record. But and you said at the beginning, this is also an album of self-reflection for me, Tom. Yeah. What does that mean?
I think this is a record of self-reflection in so much as I only did it once before, Tom. I really only have the other one to reflect on, you know? Yeah. So it was a weaving together of all of these parts of me. We're never one thing, you know? We have this multiplicity of identity, and there are so many parts of us that make up who we are. And so when we create from a place, you know, with the first one, I wanted to do it in Wolastoqiyik first, because that was who I was directing it towards. But that doesn't necessarily reflect my everyday life, you know. I don't just speak Wolastoqiyik.
Right
we're here. Look at me go. Yeah, I'm doing okay. But you know what I'm saying? It's like it wasn't. It was a part of me, but it wasn't a complete picture of me. This one, I feel like I've put my literal tears and sweat and blood into, and so yeah, in a way, it's trying to reach out because I'm in English and speaking to more people, but also in that same way, it is like this internal introspection of excavating kind of, this hurts and this hurts, and what about this? Oh, that's a nice part. I like that part. Let me show you this. You know, it's like all of it. It's all there. So just kind of trying to excavate what exists. Well, it's really a resource development-y kind of.
No, I love it. I love what you've been saying here. I love it. I know just what you mean.
It's kind of turning oneself inside out a little bit, and hopefully that can, because we all have that story of resiliency, you know, all of us in our own lives, and we all have something. You know, I focus on language, and I think a lot about, you know, the revitalization of Wolastoqiyik language and the fact that we're gonna make it really strong for the next couple of generations. But we all have that thing we want to keep alive, and we hold sacred, and that we want to protect. And I think if we can tap into that for everyone, we're gonna create a movement, I think, of people that are putting their passion at the forefront.
Well, now I understand even more so that this record is born out of a lot.
Yeah.
Born out of a lot. And I feel, was this weird to say? I feel a bit closer to you having listened to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, man. I really do hope that's the ticket, and that a lot of people go away with that same sense of knowing me and maybe asking questions about themselves more, and thinking about, their communities, who surrounds them, because in this time we need each other. It's so important right now. So
that's the other thing I was thinking about when I was listening to this record.
Yeah.
Is it's a courageous record about how we actually all need one another.
Yeah. So the voices are all there. This choir that we built for this record is such like an essential part of it, and so we hear them all throughout this piece, and it is that reminder of like, no, we got each other. Don't worry.
Jeremy, you know how I feel about you.
Well, listen, you know how mutual it is. So, listen, the cameras are right here, Tom. Don't be starting rumors.
Thanks for coming in.
It's a pleasure.
Always. Come in again sometime soon.
I'll see you then.
Okay.